The impossible assignment Commander Zephyr of the Galactic Survival Academy stood before his mixed species class, his crystalline blue skin shimmering with authority. The Academy's most challenging course was about to begin, and his reputation for breaking overconfident students preceded him like a storm cloud. Today's lesson would separate the truly capable from the merely arrogant. "Students," Zephyr announced, his voice carrying across the lecture hall with practiced precision, "you will be dropped on Desolation Prime, a Class 9 hostile world where even our most advanced species have struggled to survive for 72 hours. The room fell silent except for the nervous clicking of Krillian mandibles and the soft humming of worried ethereal energy fields. Marcus Webb, the lone human in the class, leaned back in his chair with a casual confidence that made his alien classmates uncomfortable. While others frantically scribbled notes on their quantum tablets, Marcus sketched something that looked suspiciously like building blueprints on old-fashioned paper. His relaxed demeanor stood in stark contrast to the mounting panic around him. Vorthik, a massive insectoid whose species had dominated harsh worlds for millennia, shittered mockingly. What can the soft-skinned human possibly accomplish where proper warriors have failed? His compound eyes glittered with superiority as he flexed his razor-sharp claws. Humans are weak creatures who rely on technology for everything. Marcus looked up from his sketching with a smile that would have worried anyone who knew human expressions better. "That's an interesting perspective, Vorthik. Tell me, how long did it take your species to develop space travel after achieving basic tool use?" 12,000 years, Vorthik replied proudly. "We perfected our natural abilities before reaching for the stars." "Fascinating," Marcus nodded, making a note on his paper. "And Zilara, what about your people?" The ethereal being's energy field pulsed nervously. "The Lumina required 8,000 years to progress from fire-making to stellar navigation. We had to overcome our energy-based physiology's limitations." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Commander Zephyr, what's the record for surviving on Desolation Prime without technological assistance?" 72 hours, Zephyr replied, his tone suggesting he expected the human to barely manage 12. "Set by a team of 3 Krillian tunnel warriors working together. The environment is utterly hostile toxic atmosphere, extreme temperature fluctuations, acidic precipitation, and predators that can dissolve metal." "Sounds challenging," Marcus said, still sketching. "What exactly are the survival parameters? Just staying alive, or are we talking about actual long-term habitability?" "Survival only," Zephyr clarified. "No species has ever achieved anything resembling comfort on Desolation Prime. The goal is simply to avoid death for as long as possible." Marcus's smile widened. "Commander, you mentioned no technological assistance. Does that include things I can make from local materials?" "Anything you can craft with your own appendages from naturally occurring resources is permitted," Zephyr confirmed. "Though I doubt primitive tool-making will help you against acid rain and atmospheric toxins." "Perfect," Marcus said, gathering his sketches. "When do we deploy?" As the class filed out, Zilara's energy field flickered with concern. "Marcus, aren't you worried? Your species lacks natural armor, toxic resistance, or tunneling abilities. What advantages do humans have?" Marcus patted the nervous alien's energy field gently. "Zilara, my friend, humans have been surviving on hostile worlds for over 200,000 years. We've developed a few tricks along the way." "What, Commander?" Zephyr didn't know was that Marcus had spent his childhood, summers with his grandmother, on Earth's most unforgiving frontier colonies. She had taught him that survival wasn't about enduring hardship. It was about turning any environment into home. The transport ship shuddered as it entered Desolation Prime's atmosphere, and Marcus could already see the toxic storm swirling below. This wasn't going to be about survival at all. This was going to be about showing the galaxy what human ingenuity could accomplish when comfort was the goal, Not mere existence. First, contact with chaos. The drop pods hit desolation-primed surface. With the subtlety of meteor impacts, each one designed to scatter the students across the planet's most challenging terrain. Marcus emerged from his pod to find himself in what could only be described as nature's attempt at creating hell on Earth. The sky burned orange with toxic gases. Acid rain hissed as it struck the ground, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with corrosive particles. His alien classmates had already begun their desperate survival strategies. Through his environmental suit's communication system, he could hear Vorthic's frantic digging as the insectoid tried to burrow beneath the acid rain. Zilara's panicked. Energy pulses indicated she was struggling to maintain her ethereal form against the planet's harsh electromagnetic interference. Marcus, however, stood perfectly still in the middle of the toxic storm, apparently admiring the view like a tourist at a particularly interesting museum exhibit. His environmental suit's sensors were working overtime, but he seemed remarkably calm for someone standing in an atmosphere that could dissolve most known materials. Interesting, he murmured, watching the acid rain create intricate patterns as it flowed across the rocky terrain. pH levels around 2.3, atmospheric pressure 1.4 standard, gravity 0.8 Earth normal. He pulled out what appeared to be a handmade notebook and began sketching the landscape with the methodical precision of someone conducting a geological survey. Webb, Commander Zephyr's voice crackled through the comm system. Perhaps you should focus on finding immediate shelter instead of sightseeing. The acid rain alone will compromise your suit's integrity within hours. Oh, I'm not worried about the rain, Marcus replied, now examining some unusual rock formations with the interest of someone who'd found exactly what they were looking for. This is actually perfect conditions for what I have in mind. Perfect conditions? Vorthic's voice was muffled by dirt and panic. The atmosphere is trying to dissolve us. Sure, but look at the opportunities, Marcus said, pointing to a series of natural caves that most would see as temporary refuge. Natural limestone formations perfect for acid neutralization, geothermal vents for energy and heating, and these rock formations indicate significant mineral deposits. Plus, the local ecosystem has adapted to produce some fascinating chemical compounds. He knelt down and examined what appeared to be a crystalline formation growing from the ground. This is amazing. The local geology has created natural alkaline crystals as a response to the acid rain. It's like the planet is providing its own neutralizing agents. Marcus, Zilara's energy field was barely visible through the electromagnetic interference. You're talking about this place like it's a resource depot, not a death trap. Because it is a resource depot, Marcus replied, carefully collecting samples of the alkaline crystals. Every hostile environment is just an engineering challenge waiting for the right solution. Humans learned this lesson about 50,000 years ago when our ancestors decided to live everywhere, from Arctic tundra to volcanic islands. He moved to one of the geothermal vents, testing the temperature and chemical composition with instruments that looked suspiciously sophisticated for primitive tools. Perfect. Natural heating, steam power potential, and the mineral content suggests we can extract everything needed for advanced chemical processes. Advanced chemical processes? Commander Zephyr's voice carried a note of concern. Webb, you're supposed to be surviving, not conducting industrial chemistry. Commander, with respect, survival is just the minimum standard, Marcus said, now examining the cave systems with the eye of someone planning major construction projects. Humans don't just survive hostile environments. We make them comfortable, then we make them profitable, then we make them home. He'd found what he was looking for, a cave system with natural airflow, proximity to geothermal activity, and limestone formations that could be processed into building materials. The entrance was perfectly positioned to take advantage of the prevailing winds while being protected from the worst of the acid rain. I'm going to need about 6 hours to get the basic infrastructure in place, Marcus announced, unloading equipment from his pack that looked far more sophisticated than anyone had expected. And another 12 hours for the comfort amenities. Should have a fully functional living space by tomorrow morning. Living space? Vorthik had given up digging and was now listening with the horrified fascination of someone watching a natural disaster unfold. You're planning to build a house. On this nightmare world? Not just a house, Marcus corrected, beginning to lay out what appeared to be architectural plans. A proper home. Climate-controlled, chemically stable atmosphere, running water, maybe even some basic manufacturing capabilities. The geothermal energy alone could power a small industrial complex. The silence that followed was broken only by the steady hiss of acid rain and the distant sound of Zilara's energy field fluctuating in panic. Marcus had just announced his intention to not merely survive Desolation Prime, but to colonize it. Commander Zephyr made a note on his tablet that no one would ever believe. The human wasn't just attempting to survive. He was planning to turn hell into a vacation resort. Engineering miracles from chaos 6 hours later, Marcus had accomplished something that violated every known principle of hostile environment survival. Instead of huddling in a cave waiting for death, he had transformed a section of desolation, Prime into what could only be described as an active construction site. The sound of purposeful work echoed through the toxic atmosphere as he implemented what appeared to be a comprehensive terraforming project. The alkaline crystals he'd collected had been processed into a neutralizing compound that created a breathable bubble around his work area. The acid rain that had been terrorizing his classmates was now being channeled through a series of carved channels into collection pools, where it was systematically neutralized and converted into clean water. "This is impossible," Vorthik's voice crackled through the cum system. The insectoid had abandoned his burrow to watch Marcus work, his compound eyes struggling to process what he was seeing. "You're changing the planet's chemistry with hand tools." "Not changing it," Marcus corrected, carefully adjusting what appeared to be a primitive but highly effective filtration system. "I'm working with it. Every hostile environment has natural processes that can be redirected for human benefit. The trick is understanding the chemistry and physics involved." He'd constructed what could only be called a chemical processing plant from local materials. Limestone formations had been carved into reaction vessels, geothermal vents had been tapped for energy, and the natural cave system had been modified into a multi-chamber facility that would have impressed professional engineers. "How do you know how to do this?" Zilara asked, her energy field stabilizing as she observed Marcus's work from a safe distance. This level of environmental engineering should require advanced education and specialized equipment. "My grandmother was a frontier colonist," Marcus replied, installing what appeared to be a sophisticated air circulation system made entirely from processed local materials. She settled on Kepler 442b when it was still a Class 8 hostile world. "Taught me that humans don't adapt to environments. We adapt environments to humans." The cave system he'd chosen was rapidly becoming something that resembled a comfortable living space rather than a survival shelter. The main chamber had been enlarged and smoothed, with properly engineered airflow that kept the atmosphere clean and breathable. The walls were lined with processed limestone that neutralized any remaining acidic particles, and the floor had been leveled and sealed with a compound made from local minerals. "Webb," Commander Zephyr's voice carried a note of academic panic. "You're supposed to be demonstrating survival capabilities, not whatever this is." "This is survival, Commander," Marcus replied, now installing what appeared to be a functional lighting system powered by the geothermal energy. "Human-style survival. We don't just endure hostile conditions, we eliminate them." He'd moved on to what could only be called interior decorating. The limestone walls had been carved with functional niches for storage and equipment. A raised sleeping platform had been constructed with proper insulation and drainage. Most impossibly, he'd created what appeared to be a functional kitchen area with running water and a cooking surface heated by redirected geothermal energy. "This is a residence," Vorthik said flatly. "You've built a house on a planet that dissolves." "Metal. Home," Marcus corrected, testing his water filtration system. "There's a difference. A house is just structure. Home is where you're comfortable enough to think about tomorrow instead of just surviving today." The other students had begun gathering outside Marcus's expanding complex, their own survival efforts abandoned in favor of gaping at what the human had accomplished. Through the clear sections of his atmospheric processing system, they could see him moving around his underground facility with the casual confidence of someone checking on a weekend project. "The atmospheric processors are working perfectly," Marcus announced, emerging from his cave complex without his environmental suit. "Clean air, comfortable temperature, proper humidity levels. The water reclamation system is producing about 50 liters per hour of drinking water, and the mineral extraction setup should have basic manufacturing capabilities online by tomorrow." "You're not wearing your suit," Zilara whispered. "How is that possible?" "The atmospheric processors create a positive pressure environment with filtered air," Marcus explained, as if this were the most obvious thing in the world. "The acid rain gets neutralized before it reaches the living spaces, and the geothermal regulation system maintains optimal temperature year-round." He'd achieved something that the Galactic Survival Academy had deemed impossible. Marcus hadn't just survived Desolation Prime, he'd made it livable. The toxic hellscape that had defeated every previous attempt at long-term habitation had been transformed into a comfortable living space in less than a day. "Would anyone like to come in for dinner?" Marcus asked, gesturing toward his complex. "I've got a stew going that should be ready in about an hour." Commander Zephyr sat down heavily on a nearby rock, his tablet forgotten in his hands. The human had just offered to host a dinner party on a planet that was supposed to kill them all. The dinner, that changed everything. The interior of Marcus's complex defied every assumption. The alien students had about human primitive survival capabilities. What had been a toxic cave system 12 hours earlier had been transformed into something that resembled a comfortable underground resort. The main living area featured smooth walls, proper lighting, and furniture that looked like it had been crafted by skilled artisans rather than carved from local materials by someone fighting for survival. "Welcome to what humans call making the best of a bad situation," Marcus said, gesturing for his guests to enter. The air inside was not only breathable, but actually pleasant, with a faint mineral scent that suggested sophisticated atmospheric processing. "Please have a seat. Dinner should be ready shortly." Vorthik entered first, his razor-sharp claws clicking nervously against the stone floor. The massive insectoid had spent the day digging increasingly desperate burrows, each one compromised by acid rain and toxic gases. Now he found himself in a space that was not only safe, but actually comfortable. "This is impossible," he muttered, examining the carved stone furniture with the eye of someone who understood structural engineering. "This level of craftsmanship should take months." "Efficiency comes from understanding your materials," Marcus replied, stirring something that smelled remarkably like actual food in a cooking pot made from processed limestone. "Humans have been working with stone for about 2 million years. You develop certain shortcuts." Zara's energy field flickered with amazement as she examined the atmospheric processing system. "Marcus, this isn't primitive survival. This is advanced environmental engineering. How did you learn to build atmospheric processors from local materials?" "Grandmother again," Marcus said, adding what appeared to be locally gathered herbs to his cooking. "She used to say that every planet is just a puzzle waiting to be solved. The trick is understanding what pieces you're working with." The meal Marcus served would later be remembered as the moment when galactic understanding of human capabilities underwent a fundamental revision. The stew was not only edible, but actually delicious, made from processed local plants and minerals. That had been transformed through techniques that looked like primitive cooking, but demonstrated advanced chemistry knowledge. "How did you know which plants were safe to eat?" asked Zarian, a cautious herbivore whose species had spent the day hiding from everything that moved. "Most of the vegetation here is toxic." "Pattern recognition," Marcus replied, serving portions, with the casual confidence of someone who'd never doubted the outcome. "Humans have been identifying edible plants for hundreds of thousands of years. The basic principles are the same everywhere. Understand the chemistry, test systematically, and learn from what the local ecosystem tells you." Commander Zephyr, who had initially intended to observe from a safe distance, found himself drawn into the complex by the impossible reality of what Marcus had accomplished. "Webb, this violates every principle of hostile environment survival. You're supposed to be enduring hardship, not entertaining guests." "Commander, with respect, that's where you're wrong," Marcus said, offering the academic a bowl of stew that smelled better than anything served in the Academy's cafeteria. "Humans don't survive hostile environments by enduring them. We survive by making them not hostile." He gestured around the comfortable living space. Every human settlement in history started exactly like this. Someone looked at a place that seemed impossible to live in and said, "I bet I can make this work." Arctic tundra, volcanic islands, desert wastelands, ocean depths, if it exists. Humans have probably figured out how to live there comfortably. "But the time frame," Vorthik protested, his mandibles clicking with confusion. "This level of infrastructure should require teams of specialists working for months." "Time is relative," Marcus replied, now serving what appeared to be a dessert made from processed local minerals and plant extracts. "When you understand the fundamentals, the specific techniques adapt to whatever materials you have available. My grandmother could build a functioning homestead in about a week, regardless of the planet's conditions." The alien students ate in stunned silence, Icho. The new standard dawn broke over Desolation Prime with a kind of clear, clean light that shouldn't have been possible on a toxic world. Marcus emerged from his complex to find the landscape around his settlement had undergone a subtle but significant transformation. The atmospheric processors had created a growing bubble of clean air. The acid rain had been neutralized across a widening area, and what had been a hostile wasteland 24 hours earlier was beginning to look like the foundation of a permanent colony. His alien classmates gathered outside the complex, each one bearing the unmistakable signs of a species that had spent the night questioning everything they thought they knew about survival, engineering, and the fundamental nature of hostile environments. Their various attempts at basic shelter looked pathetic compared to Marcus's expanding settlement. "Good morning, everyone," Marcus said cheerfully, emerging from what appeared to be a workshop area that hadn't existed the previous day. "I hope you slept well. I've got coffee brewing if anyone's interested." "Coffee," Commander Zephyr repeated slowly, as if testing the word for sanity. "You made coffee on a planet that dissolves metal. Local plant extract, properly processed and filtered," Marcus replied, pouring steaming liquid from what appeared to be a sophisticated brewing system made entirely from local materials. "Turns out this world has some interesting botanical specimens. Once you know what to look for." The transformation of the area around Marcus's settlement was becoming more apparent as the morning progressed. What had been toxic wasteland was now showing signs of systematic environmental improvement. The acid rain collection system had expanded overnight, creating a network of channels that directed corrosive precipitation into processing facilities that converted it into clean water and useful chemical compounds. "Marcus," Vorthik said, his voice carrying the hollow tone of someone whose worldview had been systematically demolished, What exactly did you do last night? Infrastructure expansion, Marcus replied, consulting what appeared to be architectural plans for a small city. The basic life support systems were working perfectly, so I started on the secondary systems. Manufacturing capabilities expanded, atmospheric processing, and the foundation work for permanent habitation. He led them on a tour of his expanding complex, and what they saw would later be remembered as the moment when galactic understanding of human engineering capabilities underwent a complete revision. The underground facility now included multiple chambers connected by properly engineered corridors. Each room served a specific purpose: living quarters, workshop areas, food processing, and what appeared to be a laboratory for analyzing local materials. "This is a research station," Zilara said, her energy field stabilizing as she examined the scientific equipment Marcus had constructed for local materials. "You built a functioning laboratory overnight." "Well, I needed to properly analyze the local ecosystem," Marcus explained, showing them instruments that looked primitive but demonstrated sophisticated understanding of chemistry and physics. Can't build a permanent settlement without understanding what you're working with. The scope of what Marcus had accomplished was becoming clear to Commander Zephyr as they completed the tour. The human hadn't just survived Desolation Prime, he'd begun the process of colonizing it. The atmospheric processors were expanding their area of influence. The mineral extraction systems were producing raw materials for construction, and the entire facility was designed for growth and expansion. "Webb," Commander Zephyr said, his academic composure finally cracking. "This isn't survival. This is terraforming. You've begun the process of making this planet habitable." "That's what humans do, Commander," Marcus replied, now showing them plans for expanded settlements that could support hundreds of colonists. "We don't just survive hostile environments, we fix them." Every human world started exactly like this. Someone looked at a place that seemed impossible to live in and decided to make it home. The alien students stood in stunned silence as the implications of what they'd witnessed began to sink in. Marcus had demonstrated that human primitive survival capabilities were actually advanced colonization techniques. What their species considered impossible, humans treated as standard procedure. "The assignment was survival," Vorthix said slowly. "You turned it into colonization." "The assignment was 72 hours of staying alive," Marcus corrected, handing out cups of coffee that tasted better than anything available in the Academy's cafeteria. "I just applied human standards to the problem. Humans don't just stay. Alive, we make life worth living." Commander Zephyr looked at his tablet, where the words "Mission Complete" blinked insistently. The human had not only survived the allotted time, but had established infrastructure that could support permanent habitation. The toxic hellscape of Desolation Prime had been transformed into the foundation of a thriving colony. "Mr. Webb," Commander Zephyr said formally, "I believe we need to revise our understanding of human survival capabilities." Marcus smiled, gesturing toward the expanding settlement that would eventually become the first permanent human colony on Desolation Prime. "Commander, you haven't seen anything yet? Wait until you see what we can accomplish when we're actually trying." The assignment had been survival. The human had turned it into the beginning of an empire.